So, we talk a lot about sense of belonging and that relationship to community. And I'm really excited to have Errin Heyman with us today, who's going to talk about the work that National University is doing in this space, and really their vision for the evolution of the learning experience and how these things need to be really thought about intentionally and brought into that design, if we're really going to support our digital learners going forward. So very much looking forward to this conversation. We are recording this session, so we'll send that out afterward. You don't need to take screenshots of all the slides. We'll get all of that to you, and you can share it with anybody who maybe wasn't able to join when we started. We would love to know who we have in the audience, so I will introduce all the speakers here, but if you could just take a minute to drop a note in the chat, let us know who you are, where you're coming from, what your role is, and if there is something really specific about the conversation today that resonated with you or that you're particularly interested in learning, let us know. We certainly can look at that and make sure that we incorporate that into the conversation. So please share as much as you can. And obviously we'd love for even the members of our community here to talk to each other and collaborate, and we can all learn from each other today. Oops. Excuse me. All right. So I'm Katie Kapler. I am co-founder and CEO of Inscribe. We are sponsoring the conversation today. I'll talk in just 1 second about who we are and what we do in case you're not familiar with our product. But more importantly, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Errin Heyman, who is here as the Associate Vice President of Learning Experience from National University. Full disclosure, I have known Errin for many, many years. We go way back. So it's been wonderful, Errin, to watch your journey in this space and to see the impact that you've had, especially for these digital and non-traditional learners, which I know is very near and dear to your heart. Also have with us today Danielle Bonner from our team. Danielle manages all of our sales and marketing, so you might have heard from her before, but today her role is to keep us on track, also to keep an eye on the chat. So if you do have questions or comments along the way, please put them in the chat. One thing to keep in mind is that sometimes when you launch the chat, it will default to just messaging the host and panelists, which is fine. But if you would like the other participants to see your comments, just make sure you change that in that drop down before you post. So Danielle will interrupt us as we go, make sure that we're addressing any questions that you have along the way. And we'd love to keep this conversational and again, incorporate your thoughts and experience into the discussion as well. Did I miss anything, Danielle?
You did not. I just want to say real quick, thank you to everyone that introduced themselves in the chat. We have quite a few introductions, so I really appreciate that. This is going to be really engaging.
Yes, absolutely. Your comments make it more interesting for everybody, so keep them coming. Oh my gosh, I'm a little click happy here. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Inscribe, we are a virtual community platform. So we help institutions create digital spaces where students can connect with peers, faculty, and staff anytime, anywhere, and have conversations that help them find answers, get support, and build relationships with others. So we work at all different aspects across the student journey, and I think we'll hear a little bit about some of the different ways you can think about that platform today. But you can learn a little bit more about us at our URL, and we'll talk a little bit about at the end of the program, if this is an initiative that you're thinking about, how you can get in touch with us to maybe learn a little bit more about our work and see if there are some ways that we can support you. Try and just go one slide. Okay. So there's a number of reasons why we wanted to have this conversation today. I think something that we've talked about a lot, if you've come to some of our other webinars, is just the rising recognition and acknowledgement of the importance of peer connection and belonging and its relationship to student success, especially for online and non-traditional students who don't have always an ability to create these spaces for themselves automatically. And so having worked with Errin and her team for many, many months, we're just a small portion of the wonderful work that they're doing, but just seeing the vision of where they want to go and the way that they're thinking and talking about this space, I thought this would be a great conversation to have. And I think people could learn a lot from both your process, Errin, and kind of where you're going and how you're thinking about it. So I'm really excited to have you here. And with that, I'm going to stop talking for a little while. Errin, do you mind just, I'm pretty sure everyone's familiar with National, but just give us a quick overview of the university, your setup, and then maybe a little bit about your role at the institution.
Yeah, happy to, and thank you again for having me here. And I see we've kind of stalked the attendees with our national folks. So thank you, colleagues, for also taking the time to be here as well. Really appreciate it. Um, so yeah, we are National University. We have, gosh, over 230,000 alumni. We have 190 plus degree programs, both graduate and undergraduate. 40,000 students are a part of the graduate programs. Is about $77 million in scholarships. We're WASC accredited, so regionally accredited. We do a lot with workforce education as well, and about 40% or so are military serving. So we really have the ability to reach out to our military, our veterans, and spouses and partners of veterans as well, and military folks. So we're really proud of that. It was actually, National was founded by a veteran as well. We really want to make sure that we're addressing the whole human. So that what we consider the whole human education goes beyond the courses, goes beyond even the degree. So we're looking at credential-rich pathways, value-rich education. So we really want to make sure that we meet people where they are, when they need us, and of course, deliver a high quality education.
That's wonderful. And frankly, a challenging thing to do at the scale that you're doing it, right? To be able to manage that level of high touch personalization for 40,000 learners, I think is a testament to the work that you guys are doing. So one of the things that we like to do, because this is going to come up over and over again in our conversation today, is just take a minute to define sense of belonging. This is a definition that we use. Errin, if you have a different definition, please feel free to jump in and add to or correct this, but we tend to think about it as when people or when students have a positive and purposeful connection. So the connections they build are meaningful, they are authentic, and they feel valued, accepted, and heard by their community. Is this a definition that you guys are also working with at National, or have you made any adjustments to this?
No, I mean, it's definitely in line in what we do, and again, the part of that whole human education is really to think through, how can we make the most of the time that the students are with us and devoting time to us, and of course their degree and socioeconomic uplift, hopefully once they get through the experiences that we have. But we also need to understand that we have a practical element too. I mean, we know that students have, lives. Our president Milliron says a lot that we call them the Anders. They're a student and, a family member. They're a student and they have to work. They're a student and a caregiver. So there's a lot of ways that we want to make sure that that experience has a huge impact, both for their growth and for their education, but also for the practical experience of life. So those connections, that authentic experience, so experiential learning, workplace development, all of these pieces that can really be drawn into the classroom, so to speak, is something that's important. And yes, they have to feel a sense of belonging. They have to feel heard. So that's a long way to say, yes, this definition resonates with us as well.
Well, and I like the way you said that, because you gave some great examples of how that can be woven into an institution's approach to how they think about their students. And part of it is just recognizing that they're not just a learner. They have all these other things going on, and that their learning is really in service many times of those other aspects of their life. So recognizing them and tying them together can go a long way to establishing this component that we know is so important. So you've got a wonderful university. You're serving tens of thousands of students. Talk to us a little bit about, what were some of the challenges you were facing, or what were some of the things you were thinking about as you started to explore the idea of communities and the evolution of the learning experience for the platform?
Yeah, I think really one of the things, and it I think really gave rise to it during COVID. I mean, we like to still bring that up. Well, we don't like to, but we do still bring it up quite a bit, because a lot of the ideas that we had, Katie, you mentioned that we've been colleagues for many, many years. I don't want to say how many, because that'll age us both.
Thank you.
But we've been in the online space for a long time. And early days, people were thinking like, well, people are going online because they don't necessarily need to be a part of that traditional campus. They don't necessarily need all of the things that might come with the face-to-face or traditional campus, like, financial aid help or help to navigate, their degree path. maybe even, the loneliness and the boredom faction. So being able to really think through all of those pieces, we learned very early on that that's not the case. And
Right.
in fact, we still come up against a lot of times online education has higher attrition, like lower persistence, lower quality sometimes still comes up. And I think the idea that really is a campus and a student is a student, and that has become that much more important as we see loneliness really coming up to play even more, especially after COVID, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose not being as high as it should be. And so
Mhm.
if people feel lonely, we know that about a third of people who feel that they don't belong or they feel lonely or they don't feel in a safe space physically cannot learn. So their brains won't allow them to absorb the opportunities to learn. So as we think through some of the challenges, inevitably, it's how do we create a sense of belonging? And it's important in a face-to-face campus, but there are mechanisms built in, and of course, you actually physically see each other in a face-to-face campus. So how to recreate that to the best possible ability is really something that we've concentrated on. And it's not just, national. We know that there are a lot of our peers and other institutions doing something like this. And certainly, this is a lot of what you look at, Katie, is trying to ensure that that belonging and peer connection is there. So some of the challenges I think are just inherent in our society, and I think are just inherent in online education writ large, which is how do you combat or how do you create a sense of belonging in a sort of artificial way? So we want to be harkening back to the idea of the authenticity and the authentic experiences. How do we do that in a digital community? And it really is that you have to look beyond the course. The course is, yes, where the information is. The course is where the bulk of, how the academic currency is earned, so to speak. But really drawing in other people's voices, the faculty expertise and voices. And yeah, we have 4 to 8 week courses here on the screen. How do you do that in a 4 week course? And
Right.
that definitely creates some challenges. So thinking through how can we weave in opportunities that branch over the courses or alongside the courses, so it's not a start and stop episodic way to look at the courses, but to develop community across the courses and across the program. So that's really a challenge that was driving a lot of the initiatives behind what we're working on with Inscribe and what we're calling our academic next generation learner experience, as a pilot program. So we're really thinking through how can we branch those abilities to connect.
That's awesome. And I love that. And I know, at some institutions, there are faculty who are really good at community building within their classroom. But I also talk to a lot of faculty who are like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I was never taught how to do that. And so appreciating that it's not just their responsibility to own this, and that like it's really, as an institution, we have to think about how to do this, and we can pull it up out. It's not that it doesn't have to happen, it can't happen in courses, but pulling it up and saying we're also going to be intentional about it outside of that space, I think is actually kind of new in the online learning ecosystem. So I'm really excited to hear you talk about that. And the extension of that is part of what you've said, which is students can be responsible for their own community building if you give them the tool set and the space to do it, right? So it's not about not being intentional, but if you give them the opportunity, they will kind of grab onto it and run with it. You did mention, some of the sort of science and neuroscience behind this. Is there anything else that you want to talk to about that? Because I know you've drawn from some of the work that one of our other colleagues has done in this space, but is there anything you want to talk about specific to this and the Angle project?
Yeah, so another good colleague that we all know, Dr. Jeff Borden, has started a lot of this work. Then I came in and picked it up at National, which is really around how do we add in what we know from neuroscience, what we know from education research into the courses that we're building and redesigning and working on. So that idea of, again, how the brain functions and how we can use that to benefit the student learning process and hopefully help persistence along the way is something that, as we design and work with our faculty to think through how can we add again that authentic experience that allows students to be engaged, and just to have the ability to add on some additional tools within the LMS and hopefully outside of the LMS at some point to really bring up the ability for that peer-to-peer connection, for that connection with other communities and even with their programs and degree qualifications and pathways and all the pieces that students might have questions about. They can look not only to their peers, but be able to have a way to connect with the faculty members and their deans and the program directors eventually to find the answers that they might have questions to as well. So there's a pragmatic piece again to how we can think about this structure in the digital community or the digital campus, but a lot of it is about just tying it all together and ensuring that the students get what they need when they need it.
They need it, absolutely. I'm going to jump into a little bit of asking some questions of the audience and digging into some of the solutions that you guys have developed, but I want to pause. Danielle, is there anything that we should address? I haven't been good at keeping an eye on the chat. Is there anything in the chat you want me to take?
I think we're probably headed in this direction, but there is a question about how digital communities contribute to a sense of belonging for students from a diverse background.
Do you want to speak to that now, Errin, or do you want to touch on that a little later?
I can speak to that a little bit, but I would love to also hear from you and the breadth and depth of other institutions that you work with. I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, I think there's opportunities for any community and any diverse learner, or however they define themselves and want to reach out. What's great about using something like Inscribe, and we also have a partnership with In-Space Proximity to really help students connect with each other. Students can build their own communities. They don't have to necessarily come into the community that is created for them. What we're doing right now at National is a pretty specific student set and within a program in our School of Education, but the ability for students then to come up and out of that community space or in the classroom, as far as the learning space itself, allows people to connect with like-minded individuals, same looking individuals, and they have the opportunity to self-proclaim as much or as little as they want to. So that's one of the things that we'd like to collect data on in the future. We don't have it yet, but to see how that helps with the diverse population as well, and neurodiversity too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to that, but while I'm talking, I also put up this question. So if anyone in the audience has been thinking about how to engage online students or how to get them to communicate with each other or with you, we'd love to hear from you. Like if there are specific challenges you're facing, if there are things that you have tried that seem to work really well, please share them. But while you're doing that, I will add, and you can just put that in the Zoom chat. I will add on a little bit to what you're saying, Errin, which is I totally agree. I mean, our philosophy and community is the more the merrier. So the more students that you can bring together, the more likely it is that one student will find a space where they can connect. They'll find another individual that they can relate to. So sometimes having a larger space that brings many, many people together and then giving them the opportunity to build smaller spaces off that is a way to welcome a broader set of voices. Digital spaces also, by definition, allow the participants to have more control over how they show up in that space. And you definitely alluded to that, Errin. Everything from something as simple as I can take 25 minutes to figure out how I want to write this post, right, and reword it and rethink it, to like what my avatar looks like, to what my screen name looks like. You're not being judged immediately by what you look like or how you speak. And so it tends to welcome a different group of people in to participate than if you're only thinking about people talking live in a classroom or even like being willing to raise their hand live in a Zoom or something like that. And then there's one other thing I wanted to raise as part of this, but oh yeah, so one of the things that we have seen in the literature is that students from underserved communities often arrive at their learning experience with a greater sense of like imposter syndrome or feeling like I actually don't belong here. And that's really hard to combat. However, one of the advantages of these community spaces is that every student, whether they're actively participating in the community or not, can see what the other students are saying. And I guarantee if you launch a community for your students, there will be one person who is absolutely willing to be vulnerable and stand up and say, I haven't taken math in 30 years, or, I tried school once and it didn't work for me and I'm really nervous about being here. And that sentiment will be understood by a huge number of the students in that population. So just seeing that person being willing to say that and understanding they're not the only one is hugely supportive in combating some of that negative feeling or lack of confidence that some students have. So those are just a few examples. There's tons of literature out there. So if you're interested, let me know. I can send you a bunch of papers and things that you can read and kind of see where people are studying this in the space.
And Katie, another question in the chat. So is participation, in the community required? And if so, do you feel like participation is gamed to earn points?
You're not requiring participation, right, Errin?
No. So I was gonna say, I'll address that somewhat. We are purposely not requiring it. And at first, so we're looking at this, we have an innovation lab that is helping us with this specific pilot, or we call it a prototype. And one of the things, so it's a pretty limited given time, so about 6 months, with a limited student body, and we'll get into that a little bit more as well. And the idea was, we'll just put it out there. That whole, if we build it, they will come, which we kind of know better with students. And think of it especially within our 4-week courses too. So, our students have a lot going on in those 4 weeks, and a lot of it's going to be around, I've got to get to my first assignment, I've got to get through my first discussion, and and I've got to work, and all the things that a lot of our students do. So we purposefully thought, if we craft this and it's easy to get to, which it is, will the students just start kind of gravitating to that? And as you might expect, they didn't really. So the next phase was, which we just launched, is what if we give them a little bit of nudges beyond, like, hey, this is available to you, it's going to be awesome. And more just keeping it in the forefront that, yes, this is here for you, don't forget about it. And so that next phase is kind of where we're looking at, do those prompts or do the nudges help? And what is the gravitation towards just using the tool on its own going to be? So that's the next phase of where those data collection pieces are. And yes, I mean, we've even gone back and forth about how the email and communications go out, because it's different if your instructor is saying, hey, there's this tool, we'd really like you to use it, versus the Academic Success Center, which is really who's helping us with this pilot. And I thank them immensely, because they're making the pilot possible, along with our School of Education, is if it comes from them, a different person besides the instructor, because we also know that if an instructor is nudging, whether it's for points or badges or some sort of participation kudos, it still gives the students a little bit more pressure than if it's a tutor or another peer, for instance,
Right.
giving them that impetus to get into that.
Right, or someone they don't interact with on a regular basis. So
Right.
Yeah, and I love that you're doing that stepwise approach. I mean, we definitely have developed a set of sort of best practices for launching the community, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think launching a community is difficult, but it's the build it and they will come, like just toss it over the wall and I'm done with it. That isn't true. Like, there is some nurturing that needs to be done. There needs to be some intentionality around it. So I love that you brought the resources to the table, that you guys are really committed to that. And I think we're on the right path in terms of, some of the things that we talk about is when you first launch a community, one of the things you're trying to do is establish trust in that space and value. And so really what you're doing when you're nurturing a community at launch is thinking about those two things and kind of proving to your student population there's value in here for you. And what you say in here, you will be valued and everyone will behave appropriately and you can trust this space. So that's the work to be done. But then once you get over that hump, students really kind of build the momentum themselves, which is neat to see. Just have to get over that first level.
Katie, you
came off mute. I think you're going to say something.
Yeah, you shared some of this already, But you know, a lot of what's going on in the chat is talking about students creating their own spaces like Discord or Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, and or the discussion board. So how is Inscribe different from those things?
Well, I'll answer from my perspective. We will never say that schools should try to stop those other communities from being formed. Like if students are organically building communities in other spaces, I am 100% supportive of that as long as they are being respectful of each other and of the institution in that space. Now, as an institution, you can't really control what's going on in those spaces. You also can't learn as much from what's going on in those spaces because you're often excluded or you just don't have access to the data and the analytics behind it. And the other thing we worry about is that when students are creating their own spaces, just naturally, they are going to be somewhat exclusive. Like not every student is generally invited to join or has the ability to join. And so when we talk about implementing an Inscribe community, we say, you know, this community is about 100% inclusion, 100% respect, and giving the institution insights into what their students want and need. Doesn't mean they're not going to also set up a Discord space to talk about, you know, their homework, but they're serving somewhat different purposes. I don't know, Errin, would you add anything to that? Or Danielle, would you add anything? I know you thought about this too as well.
No, not from my perspective. That's good.
I don't have anything to add either. There is another question. Do you do any moderating of the discussions?
Yeah, well, in our forum, in our pilot, not really. I mean, we definitely have people keeping an eye on it. If there is something that comes up that's not appropriate, we have the ability to delete it. We're again trying to really think through how can we organically see this community evolve, and if it doesn't, what are those prompts maybe? So I mean, I guess in that sense it could be somewhat moderated, but it's really just around getting people to the resources and talking through ideas that are there. Right now, again, it's really connecting with our Academic Success Center in terms of how can there be additional resources attached to the learning that's going on and potentially extending those communities. I think in a broader sense, if it were truly campus-wide, it could be moderated, and you know there could be a whole bunch of different communities set up that have different approaches, and that's what I think is great. You have the opportunity to have some communities that are truly, you know, they're student generated, they take place within and evolve within themselves. You have the ability to take it and run in terms of the subject matter that the courses that it could be linked to. And then you could also take it to the tutoring and, you know, support side for the academic help as well. So they are reviewed, but they're not specifically moderated in terms of question answer and flow in that respect. Katie, what have you seen in other institutions? I'm sure the full gamut goes.
Yeah, well, of course. And I think you're absolutely right. It depends on the flavor of community that you're developing. If it really is a, you know, for students, by students kind of space, the less is more from a moderation standpoint. The best thing to do is kind of stay out of the way. Now, if you're building a community around math, for example, then you're going to have more active moderation because the kinds of questions that are coming in might require a teacher or a TA or a tutor to jump in and help with. So kind of depends on the flavor of what you're doing, but generally speaking, moderation requirements are light. And then the system has some tools built into, like you mentioned, if somebody posts something inappropriate. It very rarely happens, but we have some AI that can kind of pick up if there's a post that maybe needs some more immediate attention. It'll alert one of the moderators and they can come in and take a look at it. Anything else, Danielle, before we move on?
One more question, and then I think we should move on. So at what point in the student life cycle do you invite people to join the community and why?
Well, from our pilot perspective at National, again, it's very specific around, we have about 1,200 students right now that are involved in the pilot over a couple of programs within the School of Education. So it's very specific to credentialing, and in some cases, the students are getting ready to take some of their credentialing tests. So there's some tutoring and opportunities from the Academic Success Center that the students can be aware of and are invited to as well. So right now it's at a point with their graduate students. So they're in the actual program, they're getting into specific courses. And we just, we kind of put the feelers out, asked if people wanted to be a part of this, people being the different schools. And the School of Education jumped at it. And again, with help from our Academic Success Center and the tutors, that was the good mix right now. In a broader scale, what I would love to envision is that it's something, from start to finish, that there are communities for people who are just enrolling. There might be communities for people who are thinking of enrolling in national. And then there would be opportunities for subject matter, conversations like Katie, you mentioned, if it's math, they need help within that, or it's, School of Education program page. I think really the sky is the limit. And eventually I'd love to see it from pre-enrollment to alumni. I think that's the total community package, to be honest.
That's a great vision. And alumni we know are eager and willing to participate in these spaces. So another great resource to have in there. All right, we're starting to dive into solution. So I'm going to step forward, but Danielle, if there's more stuff coming in, make sure I don't miss it. So we're going to talk a little bit about where you went with this at National. So talk to us. We've already kind of talked about this, but give us a refresh on the initiative that you were focused on, and then we'll dive into a little bit the goals and priorities of the project.
Yeah, I mean, this right here is in fact the what's driving it, is to truly offer and cultivate that sense of belonging through different types of spaces, something that's flexible, something that's built in to the experience. So right now we have it built in within our LMS, which is D2L, Brightspace. And so being able to have the opportunity again for connection on multiple levels, to create a sense of belonging, to get questions answered, to look to each other peer to peer, and have the opportunities there, and get pointed to the right resources at the right time, and maybe even resources they didn't even realize were available to them, they being the students. Also to help with faculty. So some of the questions that a lot of times might be raised to faculty can be answered either through peers, or can be, given off to the Academic Success Center or coaches there, or other folks within the programs that might be able to help students as well. So really the impetus is multi-layered, but it's all around connection and community.
Awesome. And then obviously to launch an initiative like this, you have some end goals and some metrics in mind. So talk to us a little bit about what you're tracking in terms of understanding whether this is working or not.
Yeah, the bottom line right now is, we're working with our innovation folks to think through the data collection and really what's going to make this successful. And it's, again, multi-layered. So one of it is, if we build it, will they come scenario. If we put it out there, how many students engage on their own without any, very minimal prompts? What do they use it for? So a lot of the qualitative study piece there as well. But to try to think through, surveys, yes. So we'll rely on the students who are a part of it to answer, did this enhance your engagement? Did it enhance the sense of belonging? What other ways might you see to use the tool? Or did it even help with, subject matter expertise? And so we'll rely a lot on surveys. Ultimately, and this is a sort of a short period of time to think through this, but because we have 4-week courses, does it improve persistence from course to course? And we have not set benchmarks, but any modest or any percentage of percentage raised, obviously we don't have A/B testing, so that's, we just have to go by, are students doing well and do they persist, and go back to the surveys to see if this community space helped in that persistence.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so one more of the qualitative information from the students, and then marrying that to the more qualitative information that you can understand around persistence and retention. And I also am very aware that being able to drive direct correlations between the work that we do can be very difficult, because at an institution like yours, you're probably doing a number of things simultaneously to try and improve student experience. And so I like the idea of really asking the students, did you use, or seeing, did the students use this? How did you feel about it? And then being able to tie those students directly to their outcomes. It's not specific, but it helps to draw a better connection between those two things. Very difficult to do. So there's a lot of scope, a lot of things that you could be doing. Talk to us about some of the specific priorities that you guys settled on, and yeah, how you are thinking about shaping these and defining them and prioritizing them.
We want to make sure, yes, that it's available, that the students have the availability to start communities and start the discussions and engage in them. We do have a piece of it. Again, I mentioned in-space proximity. They really help with, if you haven't seen it, it's an asynchronous sort of, we like to say Zoom on steroids sort of tool that truly uses space, even on the, in the screen to connect in a different way than Zoom and our usually Hollywood Square sort of setup. But combining the two pieces, in this case, Inscribe and in-space proximity, to be able to, again, enhance the purpose of the community building, enhance the ability for that agency and self-advocacy, I think is something huge. So really being able to think through and integrate that into the class experience, so that students can get to the tools inside a class that they're taking or outside of the class that they're taking through their portal experience as well. So ease of use to the best of our abilities on the smaller pilot, of course, is important. And again, the resources for students to be able to find what they need when they need it, or ask questions of each other, or the staff who's helping to manage this, in this case, the pilot as well.
Yeah. And I'm glad so if you aren't familiar with InSpace, you guys can all go look them up after the webinar. Don't be getting on Google right now. But we're big fans of theirs as well. And one of the things I'm really excited about in this project is National kind of helped bring our companies together in a way that we're going to integrate. So thinking about Inscribe as the asynchronous community where you can kind of come and go whenever you want, and InSpace as the synchronous communication tool. And then we're creating connections so you can essentially launch seamlessly between those two modalities. So maybe you start a conversation in Inscribe, you find some people you really like, you jump off into a synchronous study group together. Those are some of the things that we're really exploring. So next webinar, we'll revisit that work, Errin, and see where we've gotten on all of that. So let's talk about the community itself. So you launched your Inscribe community. How do you define, I mean, this is actually our definition of a digital community, and we talked about some of these things, right? Digital space that's always available, a safe place that you can trust, and a knowledge repository so you can actually learn from what other people are saying or find resources that you might not know are available. Did you have any other definitions for your digital community that you layered on top of this?
No additional ones. I mean, I think it's just how do we use the information within our own student body, and I think just ensuring the UX UI availability, and again, if we had a larger, I think, pilot and an ability to spread this out more across all the programs at National, I think we could do some really amazing things with a full digital campus and how we integrate that. But really, it's truly building off of these. It's a connection. It's a safe place. Again, bringing up the ability to find other people, connect with other people, reduce loneliness, encourage belonging, and a sense of a safe space. And of course, the knowledge repository, again, going back to the practical perspective of this, the longer it takes a student to find help, the harder it is for them to get through an assignment, it ups the chance of them leaving the course, especially in our condensed time frame. So all of these make sense to us. And again, that's one of the reasons that we decided to partner with Inscribe, is because these pieces and the way that we think about belonging and sense of community and knowledge really align with how we at National have that perspective as well.
Danielle, that's awesome. Every time I see Danielle come off mute, I feel like I need to.
You're watching really, I mean, you're doing great.
I am. Well, it like flashes at me a little bit.
So there is a question in the chat. What do faculty at National University do when they feel that diverse student opinions are not being heard?
That's a question you would have to ask our faculty. We have we have an SJEDI Council that stands for Social Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So that mindset really flows through every piece of what we do. We build courses and to address a lot of the diversity and inclusion capabilities. We have trainings that faculty can go through as well. So I know that it's something that we look at and think about all the time. specifically what faculty do, I'm not 100% sure. But I can dig around on that. And if we have a follow-up ability, I can do that.
Awesome.
The next question we're actually going to address in the upcoming slides. They're asking for an example of an Inscribe online learning community that incorporates student belonging. So I think that's in the next couple of slides.
What a great segue. So let's take a look at some of the examples of interactions that you're having in your community so people can get a sense of like what's really going on in there. All right, I'm just going to have you talk through the next few slides, Errin, just from that perspective of, what do you see when you look at some of these posts?
Yeah, so again, we have a pretty limited scope right now, and in some cases, not a ton of participation just yet. But those people who are participating, I think, it really shows what people are thinking through. So this is one that's an example of the knowledge piece. But if you look at it a little more deeply, maybe it's somebody who's worried. Maybe it's somebody who's like, I don't know if I can move on to the next course. So you can read some of that in between the lines, or it could just simply be, I need some resources. I'd love to know, really sort of what to expect, maybe from a time perspective, if there are things that are hard. So this is as an example that allows people to jump in, to share their experiences, and hopefully create that and cultivate, again, that sense of belonging, or you've got this. So the motivation piece in this as well, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and I think I just add, I can't tell you the number of students who will ask the same question of like an advisor and get one answer and then ask that question to a peer. And there's something about in some cases the answer they get from a fellow student that just feels like I can connect to it better, I can understand it better, it feels more relevant to me. So I love that they're relying on each other for that. Yes, and so we talk a lot about encouragement, and I mentioned the idea of imposter syndrome. It seems like you guys have seen a little of that from a positive standpoint in your communities.
I love this post because one of the things is it's students asking good questions of other students and thinking through, or it could have been a tutor. If I misspoke, I apologize. But really thinking through, having the students think, how is this course or this program going to move you in a direction that supports your overall goals? And so having students engage in perhaps a different way of thinking through why they're here and what they're doing, and maybe it doesn't even fit into necessarily this course that they're in at the moment, but to think through, how can you and each other motivate because of your why, and how might that be brought back into your goals with school and your goals with, in particular, classes as well.
And so important for persistence. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of studies that show that if you're trying to motivate somebody to continue on a difficult journey, it's that North Star, that why. And I start this in the first place. That's really the thing that will bring them back to feeling that sense of motivation. So I love that they share that with each other too, because you're creating sort of an accountability among the students, which can also be a really powerful way to help students stay like they want to stay on track. And this you've brought up several times. I know it's very practical, but it's, actually like a huge challenge for students sometimes to understand where to go when they need information. So talk us a little about the resources that you're sharing.
Yeah, so we're also sharing different resources, not only within the tutoring and academic success and library resources, but something like this, timely care. Again, really understanding that students, this is also available for staff and faculty, just to be clear too, that this is something that truly National is leaning into, is the resources that can help at many different levels for mental health resources. So just to allow for students to know, again, the practical perspective, here are some of the things that are available to you, and making sure that students know to take care of themselves. Yes, you're in a course that's high rigor and time commitment, but there are also these opportunities to use the National University resources in different ways. So it's more in this type of an announcement type post, but then it also allows people to dig in and start talking about what other resources might be available. If students might even take this to the next level and say, I've been looking for something like this because XYZ, and being able to then spin off another community for maybe, helping each other out, or again, additional resources. So you can see, I think, through these different examples, the very different types of posts. And of course, it's going to all relate to, what the students are going through at any given time, but it allows for that openness and the community and sharing at different levels.
Yeah, and you brought up this idea of it creates like a two-way dialogue around these times of communications, whereas sometimes people will say, why don't I just use a website for this? And the reality is a website is just in most cases, is just a one-way communication. So you don't get anything back from the students in terms of, did they actually look at this information? Did they find it useful? Do they have other suggestions that might be relevant? Did they have a problem and they need help? So I love that it's just about opening up dialogue, as you say, and making that really easy to find and tap into. And then we really kind of go back to this idea of belonging. And part of that is just being fun sometimes, right? It doesn't always have to be about something really specific and tangible. Do you want to talk about the poll?
I think you said it. It's just we see the ability to do different things with the tools, and just the question and then looking and reflecting upon the answers can generate all sorts of different dialogue. And so I think that's a cool opportunity as well. Doesn't have to be directly related to their courses, doesn't have to be directly related to the program, but it's truly creating that sense of belonging in a different way.
And no Slytherins in your population so far.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is, but
you can't admit that, Errin.
sorry.
Danielle, how are we doing on the chat and the questions?
We have a couple of questions. So Katie, I think this one is directed towards you. How does Inscribe approach accessibility for students?
Yeah, so if we're talking specifically about technology accessibility, we follow the WCAG AA standards. We do a VPAT every year and publish that. So we take that very seriously. Obviously, partners like National take that very seriously. So if you're going to be part of the education space, you have to be respectful of that. And we, honor that very much.
All right, next question. How do you convince students that are already using a Discord to move over to Inscribe?
So I will go back to saying that I don't think it's an either or. So most of our partners have students who are also using some of these other technologies to communicate. And what you'll see is that there's kind of a different type of conversation maybe that takes place in those spaces versus in their Inscribe community. But I wouldn't, I guess every example might be sort of specific. So I don't know, this person asking this question might have a very specific scenario that they're thinking about. But generally speaking, I would say you don't have to do that. You can have both of them live side by side and they can be very successful in their own right and serve slightly different purposes.
All right, so how do you address student communities that aren't limited to a single campus?
Like cross-institutional communities?
That's what I think they're asking, yes.
So I guess there's a couple ways to think about that. So technologically, that's not a problem. We can set up a community and bring students together from multiple campuses or multiple institutions. Really, it's up to the institutions to say that that's something that they would be interested in and want to participate in. So we have a couple of very small examples. We have university systems that will use our product. So they're going across campuses within their system. And then we have a few examples where it's kind of shared across different universities or colleges, but that's really up to the partners that we work with. So we work with them to figure out what works. And if everybody's bought into it, then we can set that up and make that work for their learners or faculty.
I think this question is going to go back to Errin. And I think the response is going to be, I think I might have to ask my faculty. Students come to college with many notions of self, identity, goals, and aspirations. Since faculty spend so much time with students, is there a professional development that will train or inform faculty on how to acknowledge student concerns, bring them together, and influence them to interact?
Well, again, from the national perspective, yes, we do have some trainings and opportunities for for faculty to go through, especially again around our SJEDI or diversity and inclusion opportunities. Is it exhaustive? Probably not. Is there always something that we can be doing to bolster this up more? Absolutely. I think just the attention to that whole human and the way that we at National approach the students. I think if we truly engage with that and truly internalize it, these sort of opportunities are there for people to engage with. And then we have, like I said, we have guidance along the way if faculty are building a course within the learning experience team, the team that I manage. We really bring it to the forefront. So it's kind of training along with some of the it's sort of a checklist, sort of a rubric, but we have the guidelines as the best way to look at it. So as we're going through the guidelines and we're reviewing courses for things like diversity and inclusion, we have the opportunity to talk with the faculty who are engaging with us on specific courses that are being built. But across the university, we always have trainings and opportunities either through LinkedIn or ones that we've built ourselves. So we have that help, definitely. Is it something that we could be always more intentional about? Of course. But so that's sort of an answer to that. I mean, yes, there is opportunity for faculty to go to somebody who can, help them through a lot of those opportunities.
That's great. It sounds, I think you're probably more organized around it than a lot of institutions. So sorry, Danielle, did you want to jump in?
Nope, thank you. That's it for questions.
Awesome. Well, let's kind of finish up here by just talking a little bit about, what's next? So talk to us about the research study, where you are in it, and then what you intend to do with that study.
Well, the great thing about this is I talked about it a little bit by prompt of one of the questions. So I don't know who did that, but I'll get the check in the mail for that one. But yeah, so ultimately, I mean, we've done it in phases. We're conducting it in phases. We're actually in the middle of it right now. There are about 1,200 students that the pilot is aimed at. Again, it's within our School of Education. It is starting small, it's innovative, and then that gives us the ability to gather data and move quickly if we do need to pivot. And like I said, we already have done one pivot away from the if we build it, they will come scenario because they didn't come too quickly. Again, all sorts of reasons around that. And so we're doing a little more nudging, a little more prompting now, and we'll see if that matters. Will people engage more? Right now, we have opportunities the first survey went out in terms of, again, gathering some of that qualitative information that we'll look at. We have about 3 to 4 months left of the prototype or pilot, and then we will do a fuller assessment after that.
Awesome. So more to come. And like I said, we'll do this all again, 6-9 months from now. And you can learn more about the outcomes and what National has learned through this process. Any last minute questions, Danielle?
Do you have any advice that you would give to other institutions looking to enhance their online learning experiences?
I'm going to let Errin tackle that.
Oh my goodness. Do I have thoughts?
That's its own webinar right there.
Yeah. Hold on to your hats. No, truly, I mean, at the bottom line is acknowledging that, students come, again, the Anders, to your university for us, for everybody in different contexts for so many different reasons. And the ability to meet students where they are and to acknowledge that they struggle, to acknowledge that maybe school isn't the first thing on their list every single day, but knowing that they're here for a reason and that's likely to make their lives better in some way, shape, or form. I really just think building in the engagement, building up faculty to be comfortable in the online space, obviously, and to be collaborative with, if you have a course development sort of side of the house, to, think around how that expertise and the design expertise can really work together, and acknowledge the neuroconnectedness and acknowledge how, the brain works. And we know a little bit about our brain. We know a lot more than we knew 10 years ago, 5 years ago. We still don't know all that much about how the brain works. So what we do know and how the, cortisol affects your brain or glutamate affects your brain, and all of these endorphins and things that happen when people feel or they react, we can use that for good in how we build courses. So, you know, taking our nod from different education research and building that into the way we deliver courses, I think is one really big way to do that and engage, and of course, build community and a sense of belonging.
That's awesome. Well, wonderful words to close us out. Thank you so much, Errin. So thank you for being here. It's always great to have you and